just starting a new stream here. I'm just going to wait to make sure it's going up because I've noticed it's been lagging just a tad the last few moments, but I see it's live. So hi guys, I'm Ben from Second Dynasty. With me on the line is Zorima over in the US.
Hello.
There we go. And we're just getting set up here for another session in Maya and talking about my work. I didn't change the topic of the actual stream again, I see, but in any case today I thought we'd discuss a little bit about my process of turning a model into an STL file that's printable and doing some basic surface work. But if you guys join us and have questions or that sort of thing, this is the right forum to ask, talk about features, requests. This version of the ship's pretty simple at the moment, but I have officially gotten the first printed piece out, which is this, and I know it's not too interesting at the moment. It just almost looks like bricks, but these would be tiles on the surface of the ship, and I'm working on a new system to sort of lock in and clip the interior, so basically that we can work with an internal and external frame and swap out sort of the rooms, because this is going to use a few pieces I haven't really designed for before, particularly the angles. If we just quickly look at the ship as it is right now, you've got this sort of love letter to the Rocinante and the Donager here. It's almost like their love child. Size-wise, it'll be a similar scale to what the Rocinante is supposed to be. If I turn on my measurements, we can just sort of see in millimeters the overall height of things. So you can see that to the airlock we're at about half a meter, so 53 centimeters, and then to the top there we're at 73. So this will put us at a similar length to the scout ship, but you're going to have a lot more interior because of the way that the decks are sorted. Let's see. Hey White Ink, welcome back again. Nice to see you. So yeah, if you have any questions or want to know more, White Ink or anyone else in the chat, just make yourself known and type in the chat. It's always nice to see people asking questions. And of course, if Zorima has a question, feel free to butt in.
Feel free to post me too if you got questions. You can DM me and I'm watching.
Yep. So I've done some very basic outlines of this. I've probably gone through 4 or 5 different iterations before settling on this form, and I've just gotten some very basic stuff done. At the moment it's got this brick-like layout, but these are some form of thermal tiles / ablative armor. And then we have the engine section is the least developed, mostly because Zorima and I are looking into running a current through here and some lighting solutions, but that's going to be a little bit trickier to figure out. So I've started the actual detailing up the top, and the most complete section so far would be the airlock section here. So the idea is that the scene that I've driven most inspiration from is The Expanse Season 4, Episode 1, where the Rossi lands on the planet. So this will be a vertical landing. Hey, Chris, welcome back. So basically, they are going to land on the feet here. I'm not really happy with the clearance here, but as with other Expanse ships, it doesn't actually use the main engines to land on a planet. Apparently the RCS system is also bound to the same fusion drive, and it's quite powerful in its own right. So I'm also considering ways to be able to feed through a smoke machine so that we can get some nice smoke effects when we're actually photographing the finished model. But right now, just the basics. It's not as far along as I would have liked. There are other parts that aren't in this scene. I just want to keep it a little bit cleaner. And right now it's a case of prototyping the exterior. So the next parts I'm going to do, the downside is I thought I would print all weekend on my work printer. I have one printer here and I have one at home. And then I went ahead and I took one of my printers home to work on, and I thought I'd run this over the weekend and realized that all my filaments at home. So I've come into work, no filament. I've just got a bunch of almost empty rolls, but none of them. The only one with a sizable amount on it is either ABS, which I don't really want to print on, and the other one is the conductive, which I really don't want to print on unnecessarily, since it's way more expensive. So yeah, the tiling's probably not the completely finished version, but even if you look at what the inspiration is, sorry, that's my website, on the wrong thing, let's see, where we got it. Okay, so here's a version of the Rossi, and you can see that it actually has tiles all over it. So yeah, not the final configuration, because I'd like to make it a little bit more interesting, but yeah, we'll have to see how things go there. I think it will look a lot less boring once it has a bunch of additional features on it. So probably breaking it up in certain sections and adding finer details so it doesn't just look like brickworks. But yeah, it's still meant to use the same design language, so the idea being that this looks like it's from the Expanse universe. So I've divided my scene up into, in Maya we have these things called display layers, and with them you can sort of assign different sections to different, or different models to different parts of the ship. So I've kind of like, once I've determined what's on a deck, I've named it accordingly. So like this one is airlock 02, meaning the second deck from the top. I'll probably, when I know exactly how many decks there'll be, I'll plan it out. But so then those are the top two decks. The next one down will probably be living quarters, because I'm having ideas about this sort of section here about sticking like some bunks in here or something like that, to provide some living space. The Rossi was designed for a 12-man crew, or rather not the Rossi, the what was it? Is it Tycho or something like that it was called originally? Call out with a 1, please. Checking feed.
Checking the. Go ahead. Keep talking, Ben.
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I'm getting distracted. So you can see what kind of a mess it is in here, and I'm actually in the process of turning this piece into a printable piece. So what I thought I would do today is show you how I break that down, and then we're going to go through the process of checking out these pieces. You can see that there's a number of printable pieces already, and this is Prusa Slicer, which I use for my first check. And if I do have issues with the mesh, I also use Simplify 3D to try and identify some of the issues in more detail. I have used Mesh Mixer as well, and honestly, Prusa Slicer has a connection to NetFab, which fixes a vast majority of things.
Keep going, Ben.
Yep. You see me being distracted by the chat there.
Kicking it.
Yeah. So basically we're going to look at the exterior and interior, and we have to make this part into a complete part. Oh, actually, this was the one I was doing before. But right now I'm prototyping, so I need to figure out how to center this piece, because this is not even an actual standard open look piece, but we want to make it match up well, because we have these channels, and if I do it correctly, this channel will go all the way through down to the base of the ship, which will you could either put in a standard clip or the sort of half clip peg things that are made for Starship 4, so you can basically rest each level on top of each other, or potentially we could have clips in there that use conductive filament to carry a current higher up into the ship, which would source lighting off a pad.
Woohoo, wiring, lighting.
Well, not wiring, but I mean, current. Wireless would be the better term. So instead of using actual cables, in theory, the pieces would rest on top of each other, complete a current, and I just got to figure it out a bit more. Probably won't be able to light up the entire ship this way, but it might be possible, all depending on how the experiments go, because from the last video I saw from Zorimer, it wasn't looking that great with complicated circuits, so we'll have to see how this works.
That was a lighting machine. It was designed to allow you to set a program in it with an Arduino type setup that would then sequence of light code, so you could have it turn lights on or off fast or whatever. That was a more complicated circuit setup, but I could run that through these channels without a problem. And we can use a plugin at the bottom, which would just plugs in the code, so to speak, the chip, and power everything and run it, kind of like a brain. So that's the basic experiment, and the distance based on how tall you've made the ship, we can carry the current throughout the walls without any problem at all the way to the top or nose, and put LED lighting or strips in, or plug-in pieces for that. So it's just a matter of figuring out where we want to do things after the base design. So I think it's doable. I've done it with other ships.
Yeah. As to your question, Chris, about dropping a metal rod down through it, yeah, you could totally do that, and it would make a lot of sense in if you had a ship like the Chimera, where it is quite unstable. But this is going to be a different model, and I'll just maybe briefly try to explain this, adding back on some of these upper decks. So this is vertical, so it's going to be held in place by gravity. It's not going to have as much of an issue. I'm going to need to increase the stability of the base, so the base may even be this first level here, a single piece. I don't know yet. It's not absolutely huge, because this will fit, I think, on an Ender 3 as is. I would just take this first level, cut it off around here, and flip it upside down, and that'll print fairly well the way it's designed right now. But then it works on stacking, so hopefully with the right pegs, if we change the stability now, if we go back to this section, I've done a version here of the wall which is combined into one piece, and then there's a modular version as well. But if we alternate these sort of pieces on each deck, so that this one's like this, and then the next deck down it's like that, you're going to get a lot of stability just from that. And I don't think you'll need, I'm hoping you won't need as much help as you would with a large Chimera based thing. Like the Chimera really, just as it is, you can sort of see you can just see how it's almost bucking under its own weight. It's still remarkably alright down the bottom, but it is a heavy ship. Now just remember that the next one now, it's not going to be quite as large or heavy, and this time we're really taking advantage of the effects of gravity. So hopefully that will help with the stability of the ship. That's my hope at least so. I'm in the prototyping phase right now. Like I mentioned, I'm not as far along as I wanted to be, but hopefully you guys are seeing the good work I think I've done with the shuttle. We also later today, just as a side note, should have the first release of Crew Miniatures 2. I don't want to show that just yet because I haven't done any nice renders of anything like that. But it looks like we are go for a release this weekend at least. So that's exciting, and will mean that the Starship 4 is finally fully released, at least as intended. So I might go back and add additional detail to these to make them not look as bland as they do. There's a little bit of variation here and there just to sort of make it feel more less to break it up a little bit. But yeah, it does need a little bit more detail, and it will get that once I get to it. I'll probably put in some sensors, different sections to clip on. These are going to print flat and just connect to an open lock there in the wall. And then the idea here is to have, you can see these triangular bases, and I'm going to have an interior modular section that just slides in on these rails. And this will be in a similar manner to the way that the Starfighters work. So it's not quite using the clips. The clips, unfortunately, they take up so much space. Especially when you want to maintain the modularity. And these are sort of made to similar proportions as the Chimera parts, but not everything's going to be completely cross-compatible. Kind of thinking Tintin goes to the moon 21st century style. Well, it is very much so a revisit to the old school science fiction. And that's what got me into ships in the first place. My very first computer game was Buck Rogers in the 25th Century, which is an old SSI computer RPG of a... Basically, they took Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and made a Buck Rogers sci-fi themed RPG, but it was very much just like reskin D&D and their own world, not following like the TV series or anything like that. But yeah, it had rocket ships in it, and that's when my inspiration really started. Let's see. You played Buck Rogers. Wow, that's... I haven't met too many people that did that. But I always used to get frustrated that you could take your ship and you could take over a larger ram ship, but you couldn't keep it. You had to sell it for salvage. That was bullshit. So that was also one of the ways that I was looking to get when I sold my last business. I didn't quite know what I was going to do, and I was making a game that was ship-based, kind of similar to the ship-to-ship combat, and that's how I sort of got into modeling and decided to repurpose the design for basically 3D printing, which is where the scout ship came from originally. It was like the smallest ship you could get in that game.
Ben, there's been a lot of interest in some of the boards I've been on about using your ships for kill team Warhammer 40K type set, and they're really interested in the idea of this ship being, the way it is, and the lateral thrust, and the original ships you've made. And I guess some of the questioning is on spacing between, height wise for minis when we do that, and how we. One of the questions I was asked was on printing, on supports, and how we test for stuff to make sure it's going to print well. How do you do that with your process?
Yeah, well, I have been at this a while now, so I'm sort of thinking ahead of myself. Overhangs and such are a bit of an issue, but you'll notice that these are designed to not have more of an overhang than 45 degrees. Where possible, I flipped the parts. This is an example of an older model where it's not really optimized 100% for 3D printing. Let's just see if we can change the background a little bit, so it's a bit easier to see. Um, so here it prints just great until you get to these door frames, which are really not optimized for let's just switch off the shadows here. So we have these overhangs here, and a lot of modern printers, even if I just filled this out so it was a straight line there, they would probably be able to bridge that all right. But because we have this additional gap, when it prints this layer, it's going to be in the middle of nowhere. So this is an example of a piece that would require custom supports under here. And this is something I've revised in my most recent shuttle by actually splitting the top and the bottom into separate sections. And I may well do that with this airlock because I'm planning on switching it out for one that has handrails here. Like Brian's modifications on the Pathfinder. And in fact, that's already been implemented on the shuttle. So this is the sort of thing that I want to avoid. So basically, I try to design things so that they are optimized for printing. And let's take this RCS cluster, for example, reaction control system. So if you imagine a real spacecraft, such as the space shuttle, for example, you'll notice that all over the nose of the shuttle and in other places they have these sort of like smaller thrusters for maneuvering. So that's what a reaction control system is, for at least. Now, if we tried to print this out as it is, it really wouldn't work. The reason being, we couldn't get it to stick to the platform because it's too thin here and you'd only have one line. Secondly, we have these thrusters here which have absolutely no support, and even if you put supports underneath them, they're going to print very awkwardly. So this part's actually been designed to print at 90 degrees like this, and then we really don't have too many horrible overhangs. We do have a bit of one here, but in general, because it's such small distances, the printers usually manage all right due to the thickness of the filament. So I'm going to test print this and see if it's in the right sort of area, and how well it prints. But you kind of got to find a happy balance between the details. So this, for example, when I'm happy with it, what I'll do is I'll export it, and what I'll do then is import it into Prusa Slicer. And what I've done now, I'll just get rid of these additional objects, and we'll center this on the Prusa Slicer. I find is a great slicer. It's free. I print on a Prusa i3 Mark III and Mark 3S. I have two printers, and you can actually get profiles for example, the Ender 3 or other ones with Prusa Slicer. And I think, I haven't really used Cura, but from what I understand, this might have better control for supports than what Cura has.
Yeah, I use Cura at Enders and Prusas and the Per Slicer both. I use all the above and test his stuff on them.
There you go. So what I try to do when looking at the details too is go to the Slice Now option. Right now it hasn't thrown up any issues with the mesh, but we can kind of see where our issues might be. You can see here that there are some overhangs there, and if we cut the layers down, you can actually see that, well, maybe these could slightly be an issue. I won't know 100% until I test print, but what I might do is go in and add a little manual detail or something that can act as an inbuilt support, because that's what I'm trying to shift towards these days. So with this, we can kind of see I'm doing this testing at 0.15 millimeters. That's 150 microns, which is usually what I print at for the parts. Although this, where did it go? The tiled wall section I have here, I actually did that at 0.02, because it isn't actually all that detailed. And depending on the way you divide things up, it can look quite good. So this is sort of like how I test print by eye, just to see if something's going to be functional or not. And I think this should print up reasonably well, but I can see here that I'm losing some detail on the top. If we go back to the model, we have these sort of door frames, and that's completely gone. Oops. So what we want to do is see if we can just fiddle with the settings a little bit to see if that's going to be an issue or not. I've already got the external perimeter down to 0.42, which is what I usually print at, and it gets a bit of extra detail. We can try and see if sometimes detect thin walls helps. So we can slice it again, but it hasn't turned up. And in fact, the thin walls should only really be used if you actually need it, because it can cause other artifacts. So what I might have to do is actually refine this mesh. I might load it into Simplifier 3D as well. And right now I have the wireframe on, mostly because I was troubleshooting before. I had some issues of a non-manifold geometry. So if I try this again, I think the settings should be similar. I haven't actually printed with this for a long time, and even here uses a different method, but we've lost that pattern. So this is a typical example of something that I would have to revisit and go back to. So let's do that now. This should be the right version. So we want to actually go back and thicken these lines. So I'm going to start with, I wonder if it's as easy as just selecting the lines and scaling it. Let's try that.
He's working on the RSE thruster, it's not a weapons mount, so that's
no, it's not a weapon. It's maneuvering thrusters. So I'm just going to go in here and make sure my scaling, it's on 10% right now relative. This just basically it locks the scaling, so it's going to be exact, which can be an issue. So what I'm going to do is go through and select this whole pattern on the outside, and obviously if you print at 0.01 you might actually see this detail reappear, but I'm going to work under the assumption that the sweet spot is 0.15, because I think that is a good compromise. Let's see, 5% is maybe
standard ender, by the way. Detail level is like the normal, print for its that's very typical for the enders, and the CR10s and all those.
Yeah.
But you already do that, Ben, so I don't know why I'm telling you.
Let's see. There we go. That was 2% out there and 2% there. Hopefully, I don't know if that will have shorted up enough. Let's do the iterative thing and let's go to the export. We're going to save over the top of that because it's all working files anyway. Then we're going to add it back in. It's going to be on its side here, and that's because Maya has a different orientation than what most slicers have, or what the STL format has. Basically, the Y is up instead of along a different direction, so we always have to reorient them. So let's slice this now and see if we did get some lines back, but it's not very deep. So, and we're still missing that, so we're going to go back and do the interior. And these do take a little bit of time on occasion. We've got to be careful not to pick up these extra lines, or else the structure's not going to be the way we want it to be. Sometimes Maya can pick up objects on a different layer. We don't want that. Okay, so I'm going to go in 2%, in 2%. Oops. I think that's about right. And we'll see if we're getting this channel back. So it's an iterative process, which is why it takes a considerable amount of time. Let's see. Back to Prusa. And Prusa, in fact, you can just go to reload from disk, and you can see it's added this back in. So now we've got the pattern there, but I'm not really happy with the depth. It looks like this will be barely noticeable, and we really want a channel for the paint to sort of pick up. And we've also lost the line here in the middle, so we need to broaden that out as well. Now this has, I think we could actually maybe do a little trick here and select these two middle lines and delete them. It creates this odd pattern, but if we then go back and delete all these extra vertices, that's the mathematical points that polygons are built out of, and delete that, we get this line again. But what I might do is actually come in and select all of these channel lines, and that should be everything. And then we're just gonna maybe freeform it, but I'm just gonna make the indentation a little deeper, so we can delete the history, export again, and if we go back to Prusa Slicer, reload from disk, it's a bit deeper there. Let's see if we've got our lines back. Right, interesting. Huh. Not quite what I intended. Almost looks a little bit too broad, so I'm having an idea, and that idea is to actually widen the base here. So what I'm going to do is try and use the bevel tool in our modeling toolkit, and that'll just add like basically a base to it. Maybe not quite as wide as that. Let's see, 0.25 maybe. So it'll have like a bottom, and maybe maybe this will turn out all right. So it's a lot of back and forth. Oh, from the look of the door. No, that's just a service hatch, so that you could get in and into the machinery from the outside of the ship. Yes to replacing. Let's go back in here. Reload from disk. See if this made any difference. Still very, very flat. I wonder if this will make any difference with the tech thin walls.
Yeah, cool to make them a removable panel and put like the workings underneath it, but you know that would complicate the print quite a bit.
Yeah, like I like adding that sort of functionality, but I prefer to do it print in place because it's quite. People's printers and print qualities can vary greatly. I mean, you always want to have as tuned in as possible a printer, and I try to design them too so that, okay, yeah, look, we're not going to get all of this detail that's in that model. Like, you can't see a ton about this rim around here. It looks alright for what it is, but the idea being, if I design it so that if you do happen to print it on an SLA printer or DLP or whatever, a resin printer, you are going to get a bit more fidelity than what you will get out of an FDM printer. So I'm not quite happy with that still. So what I might actually do is reverse some of what we've done. Let's see. because I don't want this channel to be quite as deep as it is. Often the angle that you do things at too determines how it prints. So that's something that you can keep in mind when designing or experiment with. Let's see, did we like the line in the middle? It's not very deep either, so a bit harder to tell. Interesting to maybe test and see what kind of a difference it would be if we increase the... Yeah, you can get a lot more detail out of it if you print at higher resolutions. That looks much better, actually. So what I just turned on is it has a feature in Prusa Slicer where you can vary the height of the layers. So that was sort of like bringing back in these lines, but I'm going to assume most people don't have that feature. E-corner should be a whole panel, or is it doors? Why are there release clips on the outside corners instead of the center line? Not following. Oh, you mean about where these are locking instead of one in the center? That's maybe a good point. So let's revisit that too while we're at it. But yeah, I was gonna just bring this back out again so that it's almost straight up. Let's see if that makes a difference. But yeah, we can move these closer to the middle there. Best option is to just select.
Anybody's got feedback or ideas or thoughts, feel free to try them up in the chat and ask away. You know, need to lurk or whatever. We're responsive to what's going on and trying to make sure we include other people's ideas and thoughts as well as answering his questions. That's why we're here.
That's right. So I am making a bit of a mess of things here, but if we move these to like there, and actually really we wanna, I'm just gonna have to gut all of this to make it work proper. So at the top.
I've had it pop on and off, it seems like right now. So just to review, this purpose of the feed we're doing right now is he's remodeling an RTS for the main ship that we're currently building for the ship 5, which is a Rothbody type style vectoral, vectoral up and down thrust type thing ship. This is just one smaller piece. He's showing the work process for how he designs the detail into that surfacing to make it easier for people to print.
Good that someone's following up on that. If it's a panel, it wouldn't be a center split. If it's a door, the latches would be central. Well, let's make it a door, and I think maybe we could also just rotate these because I think it'll look better if the thicker part is towards the door there. And I think we need to move it a little bit more. So I'm going to just go and work with my grid. And right now we've got on 20. Let's put it to 80. And see. Yeah, so that'll be pretty close there. We're still not going to get the kind of detail you would want from the insides here. Like, I mean, you got to compromise with the detail levels is what I mean to say, because you're not going to get a printer that's going to be able to show you every screw and bolt in the ship, and it also has to be something, you know, that is repeatable throughout the ship. So, for example, if I well, basically you want to keep an even level of detail across the ship, is what I mean to say. And so you don't want to do one section where it's ultra detailed and then another where it's really kind of flat and not much detail. So you've got to find a balance that's going to work throughout the ship. Let's see, so I'm going to close these off. And what I'm doing here is just bridging between these edges, and I'm going to fill in these gaps, and Maya can sort of find where it wants to fill in with these n-gons. But as I mentioned a week or two ago, STL as a format doesn't like n-gons, because it will... Well, let's export this as is and see if we have any issues. So I'm going to export this, and I'm going to just remove this time and import it back again. Now, it hasn't pulled up any issues in Prusa Slicer, but this is the thing that, and if we try to slice it there, Prusa Slicer's figured out where all the details are, and this is starting to look reasonable. I still probably want to go a little bit deeper there than what I am at the moment, but if I try this in Simplify again, it doesn't have the same reloading ability, so we're going to get this on the side. It also has interpreted it reasonably well, I would say. These sections look complete and flat, and it's figured out the mesh. We can see if it throws up any issues with it. Whoops. And it says it's manifold and I've passed all checks. So, but potentially, wait, what was that? Did it just crash?
No, you're still good.
Oh, no, I was trying to connect to my machine. Yep. Alright, I haven't got it connected to the USB. So, in some slicers, it may get confused with this section here. So we want to triangulate it, which basically is going to create polygons for every single triangle that it can make out of this section optimally. So you're going to get the same result on all printers. This matters more when it's not a flat surface. Okay, so I'm going to bring these outer edges in a bit more again. Let's see, and then I might have to go a little bit deeper in the middle as well. We'll see. Height-wise, I design everything to an inch grid, even though I work in metric and Maya is currently set up for metric. I just make the grid divisible by 25.4, which is millimeters to the inch. So let's just scale these back in a little bit. 1 and 1. And see what kind of details we're left with. So let's export it back out again. And into Prusa. Reload from disk. And slice. Okay, so we have the lines there. It's kind of hard to see the height because these are the outer layers. I almost want there to be 2 layers deep, just so that our paint's going to be able to slip into those niches real nice. So I might grab this bottom part again. Let's see how much this actually grabs. Alright, that's the whole thing. So let's just... Let's see, I think that's deeper. X, Y... And hopefully this will now drop down to the next layer. I don't usually go into so much detail with all of the parts. It's just right with this particular. All right, now I've got 2 layers there. So I think that'll create a much nicer print with deeper lines. So that's just a little bit of how I troubleshoot these things. I might put these on, I might try to figure out something for under there, because it does look like it might cause some issues. Although it doesn't stick out so much that true pitch might be an issue. So I might test print that once we're done with the stream and see how well it'll do. It's an hour and a half, so I should be able to get that done before the end of my work day. And maybe I'll get one of the printer at home to start chugging out some of the larger parts. In the process of designing these parts, I have noticed that there are some, let's just reorient that, and we'll eventually just replace the other ones of these with this one. So you can see the names are different there. This one has the actual description in it, so it's easier to find. The scenes can very quickly get to be a mess. So I'm also go back into the grid and make it something a little bit more manageable, like 1/10 of what it is. I also kind of that didn't work well. Wondering if I should recess this into there and leave a little bit of extra room there for possibly having the extrusion bridge, like a boarding tube, come out of there. We did build boarding tubes. Just
Kind of push it back up to the space inside, though.
Yeah, well, I mean, the idea is it's retractable, because the way that the Rossi works, it's very hard to see from this image, but it has the boarding tube sort of there, and then like this section that sticks out here actually has like a shield that comes up and covers the boarding tube during combat. But mind you, this is supposed to be a frigate, although 50 meters seems a little bit small of a ship to call anything a frigate. Oh, I guess in olden days frigates were 50 meters would have been a lot. But yeah, not on modern naval vessels. So it's just one thing I'm sort of considering, but it creates other complications, like how this is all going to slot in and fit together, and so there's a number of challenges. The other reason to do that is to because it's too complicated and too small to actually have an accordion like passage there. I'll just see if I can quickly, where might that be? We'll see if I can find the model. Alright, well, got it. Alright, so we did a version of the scout ship a while back, back in Starship Tree. This is just a piece of the missile variant. You can see the launch tubes there. And then attached to that is the side airlocks. Here, I hate this orientation. So the idea was that the boarding tubes just slot on like this. And you can see it's sort of designed as if it was like an accordion shape. You can actually see in the inside that there's sort of like rings and sections. It's kind of hard to see in this light, but
We can see it okay.
Yeah. So I'd probably recycle that. So there's a version of it where it's sort of like you would have to replace the part so that one of them would be closed when you want it closed, and one of them would be extended when you want it extended. But I mean, it's not incredibly practical for miniatures anyway because it's a bit short. If you are coming from the 40k world, and I'm not too familiar with the boarding action game that you're talking about. What was it called again?
Okay. Just type of Warhammer 40k. It uses small units like roughly like 10 or 15 type guys type thing, small groups, no vehicles, none of the big stuff. It's like kind of an entry level, more tactical.
Yeah, but they're roughly 28 to 32 millimeter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, kill team. So I'm getting the idea that you sort of like breach a smaller ship and that sort of thing. That's sort of like the boarding team sort of thing.
That people are interested in what they talked about.
Yeah, Space Hulk. The issue with Space Hulk is it's Space Marines, and the Space Marines are large creatures by D&D scale, so they're closer to 2 inches by 2 inches. And I mean, they will fit inside, but not comfortably. So what you might want to consider if you're doing that is scaling everything up so that maybe 2 inches is 3 centimeters instead of 2.5 or something like that, and that will compensate for the thickness of the floor tiles, which unfortunately is at the height it is because of the open lock system, making it all modular. But the beauty is that you can actually reuse the tiles and create new layouts. And I do have a bunch of interior tiles from earlier Kickstarters. I guess I have my website. So in the terrain section, maybe in the sets, I'm still sort of working on this, so it's a bit of a mess at the moment and not really optimized. But in here you have a bunch of like basic tiles that you could easily use to build items for kill teams. So the beauty of being active for almost 3 years now, that there's quite a collection. I think something around the region of 1,500 unique parts. So there are a few different collections of like you can make sort of engineering sections. And why did that? Oh damn! I went to the product here, of course. Don't know why these aren't loading. Supposed to be an image there. Oh well. Like I said, it's under construction. But you can sort of like put them together and build like a room from all of the parts. Got an image there of what it can look like. Mind you, these are 25 millimeter miniatures at the moment, because this is one of the things that has never been completely standardized. Basically 28 millimeters is supposed to be 28 millimeters from the base of the foot to the eye, which means that it's supposed to be slightly over. If you've got a 6 foot tall person, you'd be and that's what 28 millimeters assumes, 6 foot and at the eye level. To scale with these items, you're going to be if you did it properly, you'd end up with something that will fit in here comfortably. But when you've got weapons sticking upwards, things are sort of grown from like 28 millimeter to more like 30, 32, and it's sort of like creeped up. So for me, it's kind of hard. You have to kind of find a balance, because I'm coming from role playing where usually 1.5 meters is 5 feet and 5 feet is an inch, tactical scale. So if you want your Warhammer minis, for example, to fit comfortably, I'd scale up maybe 15%. I did some experiments. I mean, it will use more filament. It will take longer to print. It will be a heavier ship. But if you're getting into this, what I'd do is I'd print out some small parts and maybe try prints at different scales. But I'd aim for like 1 inch equals 3 centimeters, or rather like scale it up so that instead of 25.4 millimeters, it would be 30 millimeters per square. I've done the exact figures before, and it's like 1.18 or something like that, I think. Sorry, go.
I said the point of this is it's more than doable. It's just if you're scaling it up, you're not going to lose any detail. So that's the important thing.
No, you'll get more detail. That's the beauty of it. So, like for example, we can even look at this, and you see the detail we get there, and say, let's do some quick math. So what we've got 25.4 divided by 30. Or is it the other way around? Other way around. Oh shit. There we go. So yeah, I was pretty fucking spot on, right? 1.18. So if we scale this up, so that let's see, where are our scales at? Here. So we would put 1.18 there, or 118. So this would be at 1 inch equal, the equivalent of what was 1 inch would now be 3 centimeters. So almost 20% larger. And now, actually what we can do is get another copy of this in and look at them side by side to see the size difference and the detail difference. So there we go. So it's slightly larger, and at the same fidelity you're just seeing a little bit more detail there, especially in these thrusters. Here you just get a tiny little bit more detail out of it as well. So going up is never a problem. And I know that some of our community members, like Pulsify, has successfully, I think it's Pulsify, has successfully downscaled them also to 15 millimeter, which would, I think, be a reduction of around 75%-ish. Not entirely sure. And I've turned off the calculator, so I'm not going to use it now. Do we have any questions before we sort of wrap things up? We've almost been going for an hour. I'm not sure if this has been interesting or not for people, or covering. Well, do you feel, Zorma, that I've covered your question?
Yes, the scale is to show, yeah, and I don't know about putting your airlock in further as far as spacing goes, but that's, I understand the umbilical question in the clip on. Someone just posted in the lighting channel on our Discord cryopods, light up cryopods that they did for the ship.
Yep.
Kind of an interesting little thing.
Yep.
Some guy named Theo. Anyway, yeah, I guess the only other question that comes up is since this is a newer design, loading and people going on in and off, like the Rosadante had like a loading or gangplank area or airlock where people were coming into the ship. Where do you anticipate that being on your current design?
Well, I mean, this is the crew airlock right here. So,
Okay.
It's right at the top of the tower.
I'm just trying to clarify.
I don't know if we'll have time to build this, but I was looking at the setup to print to sort of replicate the standing image there. I don't know if we'll have time to build this physical model or not, but it would be cool if we did. Unfortunately, my guy who does the models has had corona. He is well again now, he's fine, but is quite behind with all of his work, which risks this project either being delayed if I want it done properly, and I kind of have to figure out how far I can survive if that's the case. because usually I do 2 campaigns a year as well, and that lets me run my business quite well. But if I had to do one, it creates issues. Like if I were to release again in like November, you guys would have the strain of Corona, you'd have Christmas, you'd have Thanksgiving if you're in the US. A lot of strains, like it's not a good time for superfluous things like STL files. So I'm trying to figure out now what the best plan of action for that is, but I am looking into doing some cooperation and maybe doing a line of printable miniatures that are science fiction themed, because, well, we've had some great campaigns just recently that had stuff like that, but I think there's some areas we can cover of more mundane stuff than just people with weapons and monsters and things. So anyway, that's down the line. This is where the crew airlock would be, so then you have the bridge on top, and this is more or less what the layout is on the Rossi. Then we have the cargo lift. Now this is a challenge, because on a planet, mind the gaps here, and it's not closed up. I'm trying to figure out if I need to have an extra plate there to make it solid, or if I should do it for the first layer there and make this bottom less modular for additional structure. So if we look at, I can turn some decks off here. Basically, what we'd be looking at is this being the base of the cargo deck, and it would be double high like it is on the Rossi. One of these sides is going to have a ladder well running right up to the top of the airlock deck. So down this area there'll be a ladder tube here, which you could, if you wanted to, swap it out for a lift system. And the idea being that there will actually be a base airlock here on the bottom with a service ladder, so that you could actually squeeze past the engines and get out of the ship that way if you had to. And then the side airlock here, the Rossi was designed to actually park on its side, which I think they realized in the creation of the Expanse was not really practical, because the interior of the ship, as designed for the show, obviously has to compensate for the lack of zero gravity on Earth. They do a pretty good job with the magnetic boots and that of trying to do things, but you will notice that their hair is usually quite static. Sometimes they gel it up to make it look like it's free flowing, but if you look at one of the astronauts on the ISS or that sort of thing, their hair tends to just float. I think they realized that the way they designed the Rossi wasn't really designed to change orientations, and I'm not about to do the same, because it does create issues, and it does sort of like limit the use of the ship. Like maybe someone wants to use this design for a different universe. This is one of the few ships I've done which aren't really designed for Star Wars. I don't know anything in Star Wars that's like an actual rocket. But yeah, I'm going to probably increase this door height to about there. And then we've been discussing either using a crane system to sort of lift out and drop cargo down, or having a line of a sort of like foldable lift that sort of would flip up here, and I can maybe very, very quickly design something just to show. Let's get into this mode. So if we have a platform, number one, we have an issue that we have to compensate for, and that's the RCS system here being in the way. So it needs to sort of bypass that a little bit.
Save that for the next feed.
All right. Yeah, it could be for the next feed. But it doesn't take very long either. Let's see. So I'm just going to make something extremely basic. just go with that and fix it. So I'm just gonna extrude this just a tad so we have a physical thing. So it would have some kind of lift on struts that just sort of like moves past these, and an extension ramp that comes out there, and then this would fold in or something like that, is my current line of thinking. So that would be one way to get the cargo down to the ground. Yeah, so that's more or less where I was thinking of taking things today. As usual, get your ideas in on what we might take up next week. Or the boarding tube could extend to the elevator. You mean that it goes up and... Well, the problem is that the airlocks are actually in different orientations. And the other thing too is that I want to leave room so that we can make the ship more modular. So for right now, my expand style ship is... it doesn't have as many armaments or things as what the Rossi has. Like, for example, this does not have torpedoes, but obviously we're going to make a stretch goal where you can stick torpedo tubes on the sides here, and that's going to interfere with an elevator to this section. And like I said, I think the ladder system going through the whole ship actually solves this to some degree, especially since, at least according to the Expanse, the main engines never fire in an atmosphere because they'd completely melt the surrounding area with like just a nuclear torch. So yeah, I think we'll leave things here because we've been at this just a little bit over an hour. It's nice to see so many people again turning up and regular names. Hope this was a little bit interesting, and yeah, we'll see you guys next week. So thanks, Zorima, as usual, for joining me.
Sure, and just if everybody knows, next week we'll post again what we're going to do ahead of time. We'll try to get a day or two ahead, post it up, and if you have any feedback, if you hop on either Discord channels, his or the 3D printed desktop, and post in there, or post to me directly or Ben with any ideas or questions you have, we'll try to get to them and so we can cover them in the next session for Fridays.
That's right. And in the future, we're going to see a lot more of this ship since it's the one I'm actively working on. And yeah, it was yeah, well, I mean, it means the Discord channel. You're already a part of that, aren't you, Chris? Do you want to just link the invite into the chat there, Zorima?
Oh, yeah.
Zorima?
Invite for your channel.
Yeah, otherwise, you know what you can do? You can actually go to seconddynasty.com.
I got it.
And you can just go to follow us under home, and you can see we have our Facebook group and we have our Discord channel there. So you've got links there on the website. So yeah, that's how you can find us easily enough. And actually, if I just copy this link, copy link address, I can post this right here. So that's wait, oh, that was a Twitch link. Fool. Wait, don't we have Discord up there? Well, that's not right. We need to add that. Yeah, we'll get that fixed up, so it'll be there shortly. All right, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time. Oh, there we go. Yeah. Bye, guys.